Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Amia. In this episode, we're gonna look at basic networking and security for EC2. Amazon VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. It lets you provision a logically isolated section of the AWS cloud, where you can launch AWS resources in a virtual network. This virtual network resembles a traditional network in a data center, with the benefits of using the scalable infrastructure of AWS. Amazon VPC is a networking layer for Amazon EC2. For example, when you launch an EC2 instance, you will launch it inside a subnet of a VPC. So a VPC is a virtual network dedicated to your AWS account. A subnet is a range of IP addresses inside a VPC. You have a default VPC in each region and a default subnet in each availability zone. In addition, you can create non-default VPCs in a region and non-default subnet in an availability zone. You can launch EC2 instances inside a subnet. So what is the relationship between VPC, subnet, region, and availability zone? VPC and subnets are the logical isolation of networking configuration. Region and AZ represent geographical separation. Here is what it looks like. We know that inside an AWS region, there are multiple availability zones. They are geographical separation of AWS resources. When you create an AWS account, you have a default VPC inside each AWS region, and a default subnet inside each availability zone in a region, created by AWS. For example, in the US East 1 Northern Virginia region, you have a default VPC and 6 subnets, one for each AZ. You can directly launch EC2, Elastic Load Balancer in the default VPC and subnets, to reach your audience over the internet. Default VPC and subnets have all the networking configuration for you to get started in AWS quickly. In addition, you can create non-default VPCs and subnets, and customize network configuration yourself. When AWS creates default VPC, you will get a /16 IPv4 CIDR block to provide up to 65,536 private IPv4 addresses. AWS also creates a default subnet in each availability zone, an Internet Gateway, a default security group, network access control list, ACL, and DHCP option set. The default size /20 subnet can provide up to 4,096 addresses. The Internet Gateway connects to your default VPC, so your resources inside the VPC can reach the Internet. The default security group and network ACL act as firewalls. Default DHCP option set specifies Amazon-provided domain name server for AWS assigned DNS. The default subnet is a public subnet, as the main route table sends the subnet's traffic that is destined for the Internet to the Internet Gateway. EC2 instances that you launch into a default subnet receive a public and private IPv4 address. Without a public IP address, your audience won't be able to reach these instances over the Internet. You might have heard of EC2 Classic before. EC2 Classic platform was introduced in the original release of Amazon EC2. However, it is replaced by Amazon VPC. With EC2 Classic, your instances run in a single, flat network that you share with other customers. With Amazon VPC, your instances run in a virtual private cloud logically isolated from other AWS accounts. If you created your AWS account after December 2, 2013, it does not support EC2 Classic, so you must launch your Amazon EC2 instances in a VPC. All new AWS accounts only support Amazon VPC. Amazon EC2 and Amazon VPC support both the IPv4 and IPv6 addressing protocols. By default, Amazon EC2 and Amazon VPC use the IPv4 addressing protocol. You can't disable this behavior for IPv4. However, you can optionally assign an IPv6 CIDR block to your VPC and subnets. The IPv4 looks like 10.1.2.0. There is a limited IPv4 range available on the Internet. IPv6 is a newer Internet protocol. IPv6 address comprises 8 groups of 4 hexadecimal digits. IPv4 is commonly used for web servers, mobile servers. IPv6 is commonly used for the Internet of Things. AWS used both private and public IPv4 for communication inside AWS and over the Internet. IPv6 created in AWS is always public. When you launch an EC2 instance in the default subnet, you will receive both private and public IP addresses for your instance. Private IPv4 is not reachable over the internet, it is for communication between EC2 instances and other resources inside VPC. The private IPv4 address is always associated with instance after it's been created, even when the instance is stopped. Private IPv4 address will only be released after the instance is terminated. The public IPv4 is reachable over the internet. It will be released when the instance is stopped or terminated. Once if it is released, you can't reuse the IP address. Public IPv4 address will change after the instance is restarted. You can't disassociate or associate public IP address to an instance manually. Elastic IP address for IPv4 is another option, primarily used to remap the address to another instance in the case of an instance failure. It is a static public IP address associated with the AWS account. You can associate and disassociate an EIP to an instance manually. After an instance has been associated with an EIP, AWS will release the original public IP assigned to the instance. When you disassociate the EIP, AWS will assign a new public IP to the instance. There are some limits with the elastic IP address, such as there are only 5 EIPs per region. If there is any idle EIP not associated with any instances, there is a small charge for it. EC2 Security Group is a virtual firewall for your instance to control incoming and outgoing traffic. Inbound rules control the incoming traffic to the instance, outbound rules control the outgoing traffic from the instance. When AWS creates default VPC, it also creates a default security group. When you launch an instance, you can specify one or more security groups. Otherwise, Amazon EC2 uses the default security group. Security group rules are permissive. You can only allow traffic, you can't explicitly deny traffic. In order to deny certain traffic, you need to use something called Network Access Control List. When AWS creates default VPC, a default network ACL is also created to allow all traffic. We won't talk about the detail of network ACL in this episode. Security groups are stateful. Response traffic is always allowed if the request traffic is allowed regardless. For example, if you send a request from your instance, the response traffic for that request is allowed to flow in, regardless of inbound security group rules. Responses to allowed inbound traffic are also allowed to flow out, regardless of outbound rules. You can associate multiple security groups with an instance. When you associate multiple security groups with an instance, the rules from each security group are effectively aggregated to create one set of rules. You can add and remove rules at any time. Your changes are automatically applied to the instances that are associated with the security group. You can only specify rules to allow traffic. You can't specify rules to deny traffic. You can specify what protocol, port range, and source or destination are allowed. For example, for inbound rules, you can allow SSH connection on port 22 from a specific source IP address, and allow all HTTP and HTTPS requests over the Internet. Source IP range 0.0.0.0/0 means all IP addresses. For outbound rules, we allow all traffic from EC2 instances to all destinations for a protocol and all ports. When you launch an instance, you are prompted to add a key pair to the instance. Amazon EC2 allows secure remote connection to instances with public and private key pair. You can use key pair via SSH or PuTTY to connect to EC2 instance remotely from your local computer. You can create a key pair, use EC2, or import your own public key to EC2. EC2 will store this public key. When you log into EC2 instance, you must specify the corresponding private key. Once you have logged into the EC2 instance, you can access and control instances like your local computer. In this episode, we've learned the basic concept of VPC and EC2 security. VPC is a virtual network dedicated to the AWS account. Subnet is a range of IP addresses inside a VPC. When you create AWS, you have a default VPC in each region and default subnet in each availability zone. You can directly launch EC2 instances inside a subnet in a VPC. EC2 security groups are virtual firewalls to control inbound and outbound traffic for your EC2 instances. You can add multiple security groups to an instance, specify security group rules to allow traffic for a specific protocol, ports, source, and destination IPs. You can only allow traffic, not deny traffic with a security group. EC2 allows remote connection to instances with public and private key pairs. You can create a key pair, use EC2, or import public key to EC2. You can use a private key to securely connect to the instance remotely. In this episode, we have talked about VPC, subnets, EC2 security groups, and key pairs. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode. Hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. If you liked the video, please help us and hit the like button. If you want to watch more tutorials, please subscribe to the Cloudemy TV channel. Make sure to turn on the notification and stay tuned. At Cloudemy, we're passionate about cloud and AI technology. Please share your feedback and thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to watch. Happy watching and happy learning.